All right. So, we're doing, as I mentioned, we're doing lipids. We're doing lipid structures as well as lipid digestion, which is 2 separate lectures. In the lipids presentation, there were 4 major topics in the first half, plus 1 side topic. And then in the second half of the lecture, there were another 4 major topics, plus 1 side topic. So that's how we're going to be organizing it, so that you can do that in your notes if you want to. The first topic of the first half of the lecture was triglycerides. So triglycerides have 4 things that you want to know about them, and then you're good.
It's too insoluble.
The first one is that they are made of a glycerol backbone. And I'm just going to actually draw it. So, and 3 fatty acids. And that is what a triglyceride looks like. You can have different types of fatty acids, but that's kind of the basic thing. So, this is a glycerol backbone. That's important. And fatty acids. All right. Next, how do they get transported in the blood? So in the blood. Yes. All right. There are lipoproteins, including chylomicrons. So lipoproteins, which are basically little bubbles of joy that have hydrophilic stuff on the outside and hydrophobic stuff, all the lipid stuff, on the inside. And so they're bubbles of happiness. The other thing is they can be linked to proteins like albumin and dragged screaming through the blood, even though some of them is exposed, because albumin doesn't really care how they feel. Okay? So albumin is a carrier protein, and it'll take them through the blood, even though they are hydrophobic, because albumin is very hydrophilic. So the last thing you want to know is the rough lengths of fatty acids. There's short, medium, long, and very long. And so if it's less than 6, it's short. If it's between 6 and 12, it's medium. If it's between 13 to 21, so it's just above that number. Then you have long, so short, medium, long, very long. Above 21 is very long. I remember this because it goes, 6 to 12 is multiplying by 2. 12, you just flip the numbers and it's 21. Also, if you like to play blackjack, not that I ever bet, but it's a fun game. 21, that's what I like to say. So, all right, and that's actually what we got for triglycerides.
Taylor's Secret's coming out. Taylor's Secret's coming out.
Yeah, Taylor's Secret's coming out. Well, if it's games, I enjoy it. So, yeah, those are the 3 things. I did say 4, but I actually worked both of them into here, glycerol and fatty acids, and you can have different fatty acids. So we have all of them up there. So if you want to, go ahead and close your eyes, or however you want to do it, and just go over those 3 things in your head to make sure that you've got them, have them filed under triglycerides, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
So
Question?
albumin, one of them? Albumin.
Yeah.
Yep,
Is
albumin.
a type of lipoprotein?
Albumin is a protein which has some types of lipids can bind to it, and then it drags them through the blood.
Okay.
So just think of it as a carrier protein. It carries hydrophobic things. It also can carry, it can carry various hydrophobic things.
So there was 4 things you said?
Yeah, I put 2 of them inside here.
All right, so
Glycerol
was
and fatty
considered
acids.
1. Okay.
Yeah, just think of it as 3 things now. Just, I lied to you. I'm a horrible person, and I do that. So triglycerides, 3 things. For your first thing, go ahead and see the picture of just what a triglyceride looks like. For your second thing, see ways that it can go through the blood. For your third thing, notice that fatty acids can have different lengths. Good?
See?
All right, sweet. So, next topic. We have a nice triple topic. There's phospholipids, which has 3 subgroups. So all of the things that I'm about to say are phospholipids, and they'll have their own little category underneath, and this will make up the rest of the 4 categories I was telling you about. One of the major categories is glycerophospholipids. So it's called glycero because it has glycerol as the backbone. Okay, so occasionally you can switch out the backbone to have a different alcohol. Typically it'll be glycerol, and so glycerophospholipids are really common. Okay.
Say that one more time.
So glycerol is often used as the backbone, but not always. Occasionally you can have a different molecule that's also an alcohol, which will go in place of the glycerol, is my understanding. So the second category will be sphingolipids. And sphingolipids have, instead of glycerol, they have sphingosine, which is why they're called sphingolipids. And sphingosine is an alcohol. So we'll be getting to sphingosine after we finish 4 things underneath glycerophospholipids. So these ones are called glycero because they have a sugar, and then phospholipids because there's phosphate and they're lipids. So 4 things that she wanted us to know. There are 4 types of glycerophospholipids that she wanted us particularly to notice. So the first one is phosphatidylcholine. Phosphatidylcholine. So choline, right here, I underlined in my head because that's one of the jobs of this particular molecule, is to store choline. And so if we need to make acetylcholine or anything else that uses choline, phosphatidylcholine is where you can store a lot of just choline, which is a molecule. And you always have to stuff molecules somewhere so they're not just free floating. Okay?
So phosphatidylcholine is a storage type?
That is one of its jobs, is to store choline. And then it has a couple other jobs, which we'll just tack on over here. Whenever the other jobs are, I'm going to draw a really bad pair of lungs. All right, lungs, and then, so for the lungs, phosphatidylcholine has activity in the lungs. I don't know that we're expected to know exactly what activity that is, but you can remember that it is involved in lungs. Whenever I say, because this one had multiple things about it, whenever I said phosphatidylcholine in my mind, I went ahead and went, which makes me remember that it has the lungs, and eventually it became a habit, and it actually got really annoying, because whenever I was going over it, I forced myself to inhale. So that can be a memory thing. So that's, the first one has this group of 3 things that I remember. The third thing is that it has importance in neurons. This is kind of a bird's eye view. We don't need to know the exact details, but it's important for choline storage, lungs, and neurons.
Surfactant.
Surfactant.
That's what it is. And for, with the lungs, it's the surfactant. More surface area.
Rock on, Ginger.
So by you going, you're expanding the lungs, so surfactants, expansion.
Yes, excellent. So is everyone familiar with surfactant, or do we want to talk about that a bit?
No, I think of soap.
Okay, right? So surfactant is basically a detergent that allows
the alveoli to expand.
Yes, and so if you think of on the top of water, there's surface tension. Bugs, really small bugs, can walk on the water because of that surface tension, which has to do with hydrogen bonding on the surface being more condensed because there's not water above it for the hydrogen bonds to link onto. So all those ones that would be going above now are planar, and so you have a lot more hydrogen bonding along the surface of water. By putting in surfactant, you're breaking up that hydrogen bonding and making it easier to go into water or to pull water apart. And your alveoli are coated in a liquid, which isn't exactly water, but it has the same principle. And so with surfactant, it makes it easier to pull that water apart, and that water's coating the whole alveoli. Therefore, it's easier to make the alveoli inflate. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, yeah, it's really cool. I've wondered, like, if you had to jump out of like a skyscraper or something, it's burning, and you have an ocean next to you, throw some laundry soap in front of you. That way it'll break the surface tension a little bit, and then you won't go splat. Probably won't work. Don't try it. So, next. So with those three things, go ahead and just, so phosphatidylcholine has three effects. If you store it under phosphatidylcholine, then those three things are in your head made into one item, and it's easier to remember. So focus on phosphatidylcholine. Oh yeah, it's got three things. If you're trying to memorize all of these separately as free-floating pieces of information, it gets to be a lot. Okay? So...
Lectin. I have something about lectin in here.
Lectin?
Yeah.
What you got?
I said common is lectin and has phosphatidylcholine.
All right, I will leave that for extra information for another time.
Never mind.
So,
Okay, just real quick, what is that little drawing under the...
that is a nerve.
Nerve.
Okay, tell me again what it does for the nerves.
The way that I remembered it was that it helps with neural activity, and right now this is a bird's eye view, and so right now I'm just trying to know where these lipids are, and we aren't asked to know all of the nitty-gritty details yet, is my understanding.
Yeah, right.
Get categorized. Hold on later.
She does have some detailed questions, but this will at least give you a structure to mount it onto, and so far it's worked for me with all the tests.
All right. Get it down to 50-50 chance.
Yeah, on some of them. So, that was the first glycerophospholipid, phosphatidylcholine. Next, we have, I went ahead and stuck in my little mind palace, I stuck a picture of a heart because I could not remember this name otherwise, cardiolipids. Okay? And they are called cardiolipin because they're in the heart. And in the heart, right next to that heart, I have something I can actually draw, sort of. Can someone guess what this is and make me feel really good?
An Easter egg?
An Easter egg. That's very festive. It's mitochondria. So
Cosmetics, yes.
Excellent. All right, so mitochondria in the heart use cardiolipin. Okay? And I'll go ahead and write the word. I'll move these down. In my head, I don't have the words all the time because I find pictures remind me of the words. Cardiolipin, and it's all one word. There's not really supposed to be a hyphen. There's a hyphen anyway. Okay, so in your head you can go ahead and put these in if you want. As pictures, you have two things underneath glycerophospholipids so far. Phosphatidylcholine, cardiolipin. Okay, all right. Next, we have our old friend phosphatidylinositol, which we call, what do we call it? PIP2? PIP2? Isn't that what it is?
Oh.
So this is the one that we've seen with G proteins.
Yep.
And it's our good old friend. Okay? And this is the one that breaks into IP3 and does signaling pathways. And so this one's good for signaling pathways.
I have to go over that pathway again.
Okay, we can work that in. So really briefly, just for a review on that pathway, here is the membrane. Here is a receptor. Something binds to the receptor, and then that receptor gets turned on, and it pulls a G protein over next to it. The G protein gets activated because then it gets a new GTP. And then that GTP goes and turns on phospholipase C. And phospholipase C cuts apart phosphatidylinositol, so PIP2, into both IP3 and DAG, which goes, that DAG goes and does protein kinase, C and all that stuff. You don't need to memorize this pathway right now, so we would want to chunk this pathway into a couple things if this is something that you're still working on. Right now, the only thing I want you to notice is that PIP2 gets split into two signaling molecules. That's what we're thinking of. The rest of it we can go over at another time. Don't overload yourself. I would.
Ginger. No, this is physiology. No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I was like, you're good. You're good.
Just
You don't
know
have to
that it's signaling pathways.
Okay.
Okay? And this is also being recorded, so that picture exists. So, all right. The last thing is cephalins. And I'm probably spelling this wrong because I'm a Final Fantasy nerd, and Ceph makes me think of Sephiroth. For cephalins, it's probably with a C. You can think of, well, any ideas for what we could do to remember cephalin?
I just think of cephalitis.
Cephalitis? Okay. All right.
He goes on past that one.
Well, I'm just like, it's the first thing that popped in my head. I was like, oh, whoops. This is
It's
recorded.
CEPHALIN.
I thought it was a C. All right.
Well,
I like the S because I'm a nerd, but in a game there's a bad guy called Sephiroth, and it's spelled with an S. Anyway, cephalin. And cephalin is always drunk, okay, is how I remember it. Here's a big old X on the bottle because it is made of, it's got alcohols in it. So the two alcohols that are in it are ethanol, amine, and let's see, I believe it was serine. So those are in cephalin. So these are the four things for glycerophospholipids. Now let's try and make this more manageable, okay? So first things first, let's make a structure in your head as a picture, okay? Because these are a lot of words. So for the first one, for phosphatidylcholine, you can have maybe, I think we're sort of familiar with ACH, meaning acetylcholine, okay? So maybe you can just have a little ACH, and you can remember that the CH is choline, right? And that'll remind you, okay, the first thing had something to do with choline. And then phosphatidylcholine will hopefully come back to you when you see that CH. Next to that CH, you can place a pair of lungs and a neuron. And then you just have a little group of pictures that all are talking about one thing. Make sure that in your head, it's all one item that those pictures are talking about. It's a single picture altogether. Don't make them so that it's complicated. Just make it simple, okay? So that's your first item. Now, scroll down a bit and make a second item. Okay, this is the second item on your list. You go ahead and forget about the first one for a little bit. And the second one now has, if you want to do it my way, the way I did it in my head, there's a heart to remind you cardio. And then there's a mitochondria, which in your head looks so much more beautiful than my Easter egg. And that can remind you cardiolipins are in heart cell mitochondria. Okay? So let's go back in your head to the first one. Look at that picture again. Now go to the second one. Look at that picture. Okay, now go into the third one. We're going to make a picture. This is one where you can have PIP2. If you're familiar with it, you can just put PIP2 with an exclamation point and a smiley face because it's like, dang, I've seen that. If it's still sort of fuzzy, you can have perhaps PIP2, and then you can see PIP2 being torn in half because it goes into two signaling molecules. And you can have little flashing lights on each of the halves because it's got a signal going boom, boom, like radar, that's a signal. And so you can see those two things going out. When you see those flashing lights, it'll be like, why the heck did I stick flashing lights on? Oh yeah, because it's a signaling molecule. All right, now go back to the first one. What was your first one? What did you put in your first pictures? See it, scroll down, look at the second one. See it, What was there? Go down to the third one that we just made. And now we're going to move to the last one, the fourth one. Okay? And cephalin. This one's easy because you can just stick a nice bottle of alcohol next to cephalitis if you want to, or Sephiroth, or yeah, you can remember. All right, so the actions are easy for cephalin. Let's come up with something. Who still needs something for cephalin? Raise your hand. Are you still working on something? Cephalin?
Like Stephanie.
Stephanie?
Steph.
Oh, cool. So you can have Stephanie drinks alcohol, cephalin.
Drinks a lot of alcohol.
I'm so sorry for anyone named Stephanie watching this.
Stephanie.
Unless you're really happy that we described you that way. Then it's, yeah, great. So, all right. So go ahead and close your eyes. Stick someone that you know named Stephanie. And have her with a bottle of alcohol, I guess. And she can either be drinking it or maybe throwing it over the fence, whatever she would be doing. And you can remember cephalin, and you can just get rid of the ST. And you pronounce it Stephalin whenever you're looking at it, and that'll remind you that it's, why was it Stephanie? Stephalin? Oh, okay. And then it's cephalin. All right, go back to your first item. Hopefully you can see your little acetylcholine, some lungs, and a nerve. And that'll remind you. Now go ahead and dive in. What were those three things that this one item was supposed to remind you of? The choline was choline storage. The lungs were, if you remember my ridiculous breathing in thing, I always do that one right there because it lets you breathe in. And then the last one is neural activity. It helps with some neural activity. All right, the second one, what do you see? Take a look at the picture. What does it mean? Cool thing about this is the more you do it, the easier it gets to bring it up. Heart, cardiolipids. And it's also found in the heart, in the mitochondria. Moving on to the third thing. What do you see? And sometimes it's useful to add sounds. Boom, boom, boom. All right? PIP2, two signaling molecules, gets torn in half and sent out. And then the last one, cephalins. Stephalins. All right? See someone named Stephanie there with a bottle of alcohol. The alcohol reminds you that these have alcohols involved in their makeup. I believe it's in the fatty acid chains. And so you see ethanolamine. It has ethanol in it and an amine group. And you see serine, which is just an alcohol amino acid. All right? So, cool. Let's go ahead and... Awesome. So, we've gone over those. Hopefully that helps them stick. And we can... Are there any questions before we move on?
No.
No? Great. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and erase this stuff. And I guess we still wanted phospholipids.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a word in there somewhere, I promise. Okay.
Phospholipids.
Yep, phospholipids. All right. And the second thing, I'm actually going to try and write it to the side so that you can remember picture 1, picture 2, picture 3. I should have left it up there, I guess. All right. Is if someone can double check whether it's ether or ester, I think it is ether glycerophospholipids. Glycerophospho.
Easter for cis configuration.
What was that?
Easter.
ESTR, Esther.
Oh,
Is that what it is?
I don't know that one.
there. Now it's the name. Esther. All right.
Hey, Adam's family.
Woohoo! All right. This one's awesome because there's two things.
Okay.
Okay? So these are another group of glycerophospholipids, but they have esters or ethers. And to be honest, I need to check that again. What?
So the other 4 things, they were phospholipids as well?
They were glycero.
You're right.
Glycerophospholipids.
Oh, they were all glycerophospholipids. Okay.
It's ether, I think.
Thank you. All right. So, and that makes sense.
So it's ether.
Judge me if you will. All right. So, yeah, so these ones are ether glycerophospholipids, which is why they go one right after the other. There are only 2 things in here that we need to know, which makes me so happy. So, the first one is platelet activating factor. I'll go ahead and write PAF, platelet activating factor, and then I have a dinner plate, which is
Actively throwing a dinner plate at somebody.
yes, I am. In my head, I have it, half of it is a red blood cell, half of it's a dinner plate, and that reminds me, platelet activating factor. You can also have, this plate is going into active, best dishwasher soap yet. It's highly active enzymes, blah, 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 annoying commercial about dishwashing soap that's so active. Platelet activating factor. Seeing the plate reminds me of the rest. Okay? Then the second thing, and platelet activating factor activates platelets. Okay. Next, we have plasminogens. Who has vague memories of plasminogens?
Very big.
No.
All right, so this is the one that she had us do research on at the end, and said, go forth and find information on the interwebs. And plasminogens, I think of someone with a plasma cannon. It's great fun in my head, and I always dwell here for a little while watching it eradicate lots of video game stuff. So, plasma cannon. Red sparkles of death. Okay. So plasminogens eradicate free radicals, and they do a whole bunch of other stuff. They're still being researched. So I think it was more an educational thing rather than what is their job, because it's still being researched. The coolest thing that I found is that they get rid of free radicals. And so I see a bug that I just call a radical. It's a radical bug because it's been irradiated and it looks all monstrous and it's like, ah. And it's being eradicated by the plasma cannon.
So basically, how I'm picturing this is it's a Eat Her festival, where there is a dinner, like a fancy dinner meal thing over there with a blood platelet,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's like a carnival, and then there's the plasma cannon. So
Excellent.
It's Eat Her Carnival.
Awesome. All right. So
You don't want to get in here.
I would go to that carnival. All right. So let's go ahead and do a quick review. We're going to go back to the first. I've gotten a little bit ahead of myself. We haven't gone back to the first one yet. So go ahead and review the first one if you can. If it's not coming back to you, move on to the second one, and we'll review the first one. But try to do the first one. I'll give you a couple reminder things. So first one was just triglycerides. You remember the first one, the first item was the backbone and what makes it up. And you should have a picture of 3 chains coming off the backbone. So that's glycerol most of the time, and 3 fatty acids. The second thing is, how does it get through the blood? And that is lipoproteins, such as chylomicrons, LDLs, HDLs. You just remember there's that bubble with the ridges on the outside, that's a lipoprotein. And then albumin, which drags it through. The last thing, the third thing that you got right there, there's Taylor coughing, excuse me, is the lengths of fatty acid. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 inverted is 21. If you like numbers, that works for you. If that doesn't work for you, then you can remember some way that doesn't use numbers. Feel free to edit your picture. All right, and all of that was underneath the first category. Second category, let's go ahead and see how many things are underneath the second category.
4.
Great, 4 things. You now know how many things you're supposed to remember. Knowing what you know is great. Knowing what you don't know is also really, really great. So if you know that one of them isn't sticking, you know that you need to go back and research it. All right. So number 1. What was the picture you had there? What was it connected to? Hopefully you're seeing phosphatidylcholine, with the choline molecule being highlighted. And then maybe you had acetylcholine as a reminder right there for that. And then off to the right a little bit, probably a pair of lungs. And that reminds you of surfactant, allowing you to breathe in. And then neural activity, it helps with some neurons. And for some of you who were asking about what neural activity, if that question is happening every time you go here, then looking it up, it'll be really easy to stick that information right there. And I love it when my brain actually bothers me every time I go through a review, because then it's like, all right, I'll stick the information there that you're so ready to accept. Moving on to object number 2. What was there? All right, so if you see a heart, that should remind you of something. Cardiolipids. And then after that, you can see a mitochondria. Moving on to the next thing. What do you see there? Third one down.
2 penguins.
Excellent.
Railroad track splitting with the signal.
Great. Yep. PIP2, doing signaling molecule with penguins, radar, or railroads, or whatever the heck. Moving on to the next one. The one where we all think of our good friend Stephanie.
Stephanie's an alcoholic.
Oh.
Or the drunk person was like,
No last names. No last names. All right. So, Stefan. All right. I know, right? It's like, hello, my name is Stefan. And I only sound like that because I drink too much. So, we have the nice bottle of ethanolamine. Good year, except I don't drink, so it's more like good for lighting fires. But then we also have serine, which is another alcohol. It's an amino acid alcohol, and you can light it. Okay, so that was the next one. And then for our most recent one, let's go over that really quick. What do you got in your heads?
just to eat her festival.
Plasma activity.
All right, so we have, what was the major category? Sometimes I get going into the pieces underneath so quick. What's the major category of this one?
Ether.
Glycerophospholipids. And for words like glycerophospholipids, some people pick it up like that. I actually had to leave like glycerophospholipid and just say it out loud, and it really helps make it something in your head that's easier to conceptualize. Because if you can't pronounce it, then you can't really think the word either. It's like that vague thing with a G and a P and probably another E somewhere, because everything has an E.
It's like phosphatidylcholine.
Yes.
Hey, diddle diddle.
All right, so the 2 things underneath there with this wonderful carnival. So we have, okay, see it in your head? A dish, a plate. All right? Platelet activating factor, which activates platelets. Woohoo! And then we get, for the big guns, we get to have fun with this. And so, plasminogens, plasma cannon, fries, free radicals, and whatever else you guys learned during your research. All right. So, that's review.
Pause it.
Pause. All right. So hopefully that's good. We're going to pause and come back.